Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. Each episode will bring you in-depth discussion with experts, community leaders, and analysts who will share their insights, experiences, and predictions. From local elections to global diplomacy, we'll provide you with the tools and perspectives you'll need to navigate today's real-world landscape.
Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. This is Lisa Chafee. This is our first episode of 2024, and joining me in studio right now, we have Jim Leezer and Andrew Havas. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing well today.
Good to be here.
So we're just going to kind of talk about what's coming up the next few months. This is a big election year. We got a lot going on in Ohio. So right now, what's on everybody's mind is the race to fire Sherrod Brown.
That's right.
So we've got Bernie Moreno, Matt Dolan, and Frank LaRose. And as of right now, I believe Bernie is leading in the polls. I'm not sure exactly how much. I honestly don't put a whole lot of faith in poll numbers, but
Right.
we do know that of the 10 county parties here in Ohio that have endorsed in a primary have all endorsed Bernie,
That's right.
including Franklin County,
That's
where
right.
we are right now.
Just recently, yeah.
Jim,
Yes.
what do you think?
I think we have three solid candidates being primary this cycle. It's a blessing to have them. I think that any of the three could beat Sharon Brown, but I believe that Bernie Moreno is going to be the man where he's leading in the polls right now. He will take us across the finish line in November, and we will take back the Senate.
I think so too. And I think, like you said, all three candidates are great. They're all established in different areas. One of the concerns from a lot of people I hear about is with regards to Frank LaRose, and that he's done such an incredible job as Secretary of State.
Right. Yes.
But if he were to win, that means Governor DeWine gets to appoint
That's
his
right.
replacement. And
Right.
after what DeWine has done here lately, nobody trusts DeWine.
Yeah, it's anybody's guess who it could be. I think there's definitely some front runners. But yeah, I think if you look back to the last election that Sherrod Brown had, he ran against Jim Renacci, and I think he won by like 7 points, and Jim Renacci had a bunch of money that he didn't even spend. So I definitely feel like this year is our year. I think this is the best chance we have at unseating Sherrod Brown. And I just saw, I think this week that Mitch McConnell is now coming off the sidelines, and there's a PAC that's going to be spending tens of millions of dollars and injecting them into the race to help Bernie Moreno. So that is very encouraging and reassuring that we're going to have the support of the U.S. Senate.
So one of the big name people that endorsed Bernie is President Trump.
Right.
And I've heard a lot of people talking that it could hurt him or it could help him.
Mhm.
Which do you think?
There's a lot of haters of Trump out there, but there's a lot more people that like Trump. I believe it's going to help springboard him forward to victory in November. Absolutely.
I agree.
I think the temperature in the room is we want to change. And we see what President Trump brought to the table the first 4 years. Now we can see what he's bringing and we know what he's bringing. He's proven his track record. Now we can move forward and bring some candidates along. He can bring some candidates along to help make the final changes and get us across the line and bring back America to actually what it was, not what it is today. You know, we're slipping quickly to a third world country with the open borders, and that's frightening.
Yeah, and that's one of the
I agree.
things that I really like about Bernie is his stance on securing the border wall and no amnesty and deporting, especially any known criminals, immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and I think the border, all polling data shows that's at the top of the minds of all voters across every political persuasion. And I think you have to ask yourselves, it's like, why hasn't Sherrod Brown said something at the beginning of this problem when it was happening under the Biden administration, when he reversed President Trump's policies at the executive level. So it's going to be hard for Sherrod Brown to now pipe up and say, hey, the Senate has passed a border bill, but it's like, well, if you're able to reverse President Trump's policy at the executive level, why can't you just re-implement them and close the border? And I think that's what a lot of people are thinking right now.
Yeah. And the other thing about here in Ohio is, I mean, technically we're not on the border, but we kind of are because with our interstates running through Ohio, we're in the top of human
That's
trafficking.
exactly right.
And we have a lot of drug cartels.
That's
We
right.
have some of the highest rates of fentanyl deaths.
That's right.
I don't want to call them overdoses because they're not. They're literally poisonings.
Correct.
And we're struggling, and we see people, illegal immigrants, homeless on the streets,
Yes.
taking up resources, and we all feel for these people, but we can only let so many people in our own home.
That's right.
So I think Bernie, you're right. I think Bernie's going to be the one to fire Sherrod, and that brings up another question: strategy. We saw what happened last November here in Ohio with the abortion issue on the ballot, and that drove so many people out to the polls from all parties
That's right.
because of that one issue. So what do we think the Democrats are going to pull out of their hat this November to get on the ballot to drive people to the polls?
So on the abortion front, I think, of course, they're going to try to weaponize that as they always do. But because it's been codified in our state constitution now, they can try to do it, but it's to some extent a moot point, right?
Mhm.
Because it is now codified in the state constitution. So in Ohio, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher. And then I think when you have a myriad of issues, a more comprehensive political package of all issues, Mike DeWine and John Houston are an example that they ran against an opponent that only ran on reproductive rights and abortion, and they whooped her butt by 25 points in,
Right.
in the general election. So I think when voters have all issues on the table to consider, and if you actually look at the polling data, abortion's actually not really towards the top. It's towards the bottom of issues when they have other things to consider.
I think one of the main issues that'll be this cycle is the gun control that the left is trying to bring forth, and I think it ranks a little higher than the abortion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's on everyone's mind because it's the safety factor. We've allowed all these people. What's the last numbers? 300 and some thousand this month.
Oh, just illegals?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised if it wasn't higher.
come across the border this month, and you have a faction of people that want to take away guns. They want to control guns. They want you to lock your guns up. And excuse me, a gun that has a lock on it is a paperweight. And there's been several bills introduced to either strip the rights of citizens under stricter red flag laws, also laws to increase security on the firearms themselves that we really need to go after, and we need to watch that carefully because that's protected under our Second Amendment. There's nowhere in there in the Second Amendment that says that you have to put a lock on a firearm. Nowhere. And we really need to watch that closely, and we need to make sure that we get people's attention on these gun bills.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is subjective and opinion driven. So I think it's paramount that we do look at data. I mean, if you look at data from 50, 60 years ago when we would have shooting ranges in our high schools and people would keep their rifles in their lockers, and frankly, per capita, I mean, we had a lot more guns and we did not see the murder rates that we see now. A lot of it's societal decay. And I think most recently, Ohio, has passed a constitutional carry. And there's some data that just came out from the Attorney General's office that showed actually violent crime going down and murders going down. So proponents of it were like, we tried to tell you so, like this is what would happen if people knew this was the case. But people that were opponents of this argument, they of course would argue that people would be murdered on every street corner at a higher rate. But
we were going to have the wild west.
Yeah, that's exactly
shootouts
right.
in the streets.
Yeah.
It was the same. It was the same garbage that was spewed from the left when we came to having CCW laws
Yeah, right.
in the first time. But it was the same repeated story over and over again. And I was thank you for bringing that up because I
Yeah,
was looking for
yeah,
that data
yeah,
myself and I
sure.
could not find it. I'd
Yeah.
seen it and I'd forgot where it was at. But
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal data that out there that if people just want to educate themselves before they go this is how old I am. Pull the handle at the voting booth. I mean, I remember when we had the little tick, 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 and then you had to pull this big lever. I'm an old guy here.
It would be a safer route if we just still had the lever.
Probably so, probably so. But it just takes a little bit of education and asking questions, and you cannot be afraid to say, "Hey, I don't know.
That's
Can you
right.
can you inform me?"
I agree.
What I think needs to happen is our country as a whole, on almost every single issue, doesn't matter what the issue is, we're reactive instead of proactive.
Right.
And we're not educating people. I was in 4-H in fourth grade, and we learned how to shoot rifles. So if they start that at the young age and teaching gun safety, I think we would fare better than where we are now.
Oh, absolutely. I grew up in the era. I actually grew up in the era that every pickup truck in the parking lot at high school
Yeah.
had a shotgun in it or a bow.
Yeah.
We didn't have mass shootings
Mm-mm.
because we were taught at home. That's where it begins, is at home.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. It's like you can look back again 40, 50 years and it's like some things we look back on, it's like, sure, we weren't so proud of some things, but there were some things we also got right.
Yeah.
But I do think there's mass amounts of information right now, and with social media, like you said, Lisa, we're very reactive because it's instantaneous information all the time. And people have to be able to have some semblance of personal responsibility, and we can't police people's ability to think. Like one of the things that's always stuck out to me, Justice Kennedy's opinion in the Citizens United case, which was about your First Amendment and your First Amendment free speech rights and being able to spend really as much money as you want on your First Amendment free speech rights. He said the First Amendment reserves the right for people to think for themselves. And that's exactly it. I mean, that is the essence of the First Amendment. That I get it. There's going to be a lot of stuff that we don't agree with or we think might be like false information, but it's not the government's job to jump in and do those things. It's allow people to be responsible, give them a chance and say, hey, you can be responsible, do your due diligence. It's going to take some time to do some research about it. But that goes hand in hand with freedom. It's messy.
Do you think some of the pushback that we're getting along those lines from the younger generation is because they just want the government to fix everything, or they think the government should fix everything?
I think that education now, yeah, depending on where you're at, is that they do present that government can always be trusted, and it can be a panacea for all issues. And I think even when I was growing up, I'm 38, in our history classes, part of America was that there was an inherent distrust of government, given the long history of the world and how governments have treated their people. So it's like, yes, we'd like to test the government, but it's like Ronald Reagan saying, trust but verify, right?
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned education, so
Yeah.
that was the next thing I want to talk about, because we have some stuff going on here in Ohio. One thing that I'm really excited and that it passed, but it was a hot mess getting the SAFE Act
Yeah,
and the Save Women Sports Act passed. They tried it in the previous House Assembly, and Representative Click reintroduced it this time. They combined it with the Save Women Sports Act. For those of you who don't know, the SAFE Act bill makes it illegal for doctors to prescribe puberty blockers or to perform surgeries for the purpose of transgendering minors. And then, of course, the Save Women Sports Act, biological males cannot compete against biological females in high school sports. I can't remember if it includes college or not, but the House passed it, the Senate passed it, and then Governor DeWine vetoed it.
Right.
And then a week later, after the veto, issued an executive order saying, okay, you can't have the surgeries as a minor. So fortunately, the House and the Senate overrode the veto, which is a good thing for us that it happened, but it's an example of the discombobulation in our state house right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that goes back to a question you asked earlier. And that's why I don't trust DeWine to make the right choice of replacing Frank LaRose as Secretary of State. You don't know where he's coming from. I mean, he vetoed a bill, and then a week later, he did an executive order, just
For one part of
for
it.
one part of the bill. It's
Yeah.
like this. There's no rhyme or reason there. But yeah, that's why I don't trust him to make the right decision in that case.
Well, I mean, luckily the way things are going, I do think we're going to have Frank LaRose for, another two plus years, and we're fortunate to have him there because he has done a good job. And yeah, I kind of think sometimes too, it's like when you get to a certain place, it's like you're less than halfway through.
Right.
People put you there for a reason because they trust you and you've done such a good job. Like, see it through. Frank's a younger guy still. He's very talented and he has more than enough time to do other things, in the future.
Absolutely, and he's leading. He's as Secretary of State and election security. The rest of the country are looking at
That's right.
Ohio and what he's done here.
That's right.
He's done a fantastic
Yeah.
job, and like you said, he's young.
Right.
He's got years ahead of him.
That's right.
And
I wish he would have. I mean, just personally, like you're talking about. I mean, I wish he would have focused on some of the accolades that he's been able to accomplish just in that office. Because I mean, I think we know as conservatives, we were a little skeptical of what happened in 2020. I'm not going to say that I think the system was gamed. I'm not going to call it fraud because you got to be able to prove those kind of things. But I think things are going to be a lot different this time around. And we've passed voter ID in Ohio, for example, and something else I'm seeing. I saw in Nevada that they're pushing the very same thing. Now we are trying to codify things in state constitutions, and one of them is codifying voter ID in states where they have the mass ballots. So I think it's genius, and President Trump's actually one of the biggest proponents of it. So in Nevada, if I recall correctly, it's they mail a ballot out to every registered voter. I think they do the same thing in Pennsylvania, and then Michigan, you have same day registration. But these conservative legislatures or just people in general, the polling data shows that people do support voter ID, especially with the immigration issue. If we could get that done in a lot of these swing states, I wouldn't be surprised at the results if we end up winning a lot of these states consistently.
it amazes me we even have to have this discussion about
Right.
voter ID.
I know.
I cannot go to the doctor and see my doctor and use my health insurance without showing my ID. And I know my doctor. I can't pick up a prescription without showing my ID. So
Right.
to me,
You can't buy alcohol
you
without
can't buy
money.
alcohol.
You
I
can't,
mean,
there's nothing that you can't. I'm fairly certain. Can you open a bank account? Can you? I mean,
No.
is there,
you can't do anything. You can't get a job. You can't get employed without
And-
having an ID
And if I'm not
legally.
if I'm not mistaken, it used to be an argument was what's so expensive to get an ID. Well,
now it's
it's free.
Yeah, that's right.
for I believe just not the driver's license,
Just an ID card,
but
though.
just a plain old ID card. There's no excuse for that. There's BMV offices everywhere.
That's right.
They're almost as popular as Speedway. I think I'm not a big fan of changing our Constitution too much.
Same.
I don't think
No.
we should be using our Constitution to legislate.
No.
As Dave Yost, Attorney General Dave Yost said, the Constitution is the ruler that we
Yeah.
measure the fabric against.
Sure.
But I do think voter ID law should be in our Constitution.
Yeah, I think that the rules of the game change sometimes, and the worst thing that we can do is just be like, oh, well, these are our principles. And I'm a very principled person, and I respect Republicans for being principled. But oftentimes we've turned into principled losers because the other side is fully willing not only to bend the rules but completely break them.
Yeah.
And we are try to be respectful and say, like, you know what, these are the principles, this is the way it is. But we have to adjust and adapt as well. And if they're gonna change the rules and do certain things, and that's the way they are getting over honest and winning, I'm not saying we break any rules, but we just arise to the occasion and do things that benefit us as well. So the strategy has to change sometimes. And I agree with the Attorney General. I don't think that's something that should be common practice. But the way they are going around and codifying certain things, and for example, here, they're going to probably try to get a redistricting amendment done and on the ballot for November. So I don't know how that's going to change our state. Frankly, I've heard some really good legal arguments for why it's not constitutional, new arguments. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's going to change Ohio in a major way if that passes.
Well, something needs to be done with redistricting because they keep changing both sides.
Sure.
They keep changing it, every chance they get.
So here's the thing, and the way it's always worked is there's an apportionment board, and if you can win statewide elections, then you have more say in drawing the district lines. So what I've always said and what I've always told Democrats, gerrymandering, I get it. There's no gerrymandering at a state level. It's you either win the state or you don't win the state. Okay.
Right.
So if you want more say in what the districts look like in a state, even win one statewide offices. Since 2018, we have mopped the floor with the Democrats statewide. So now they are going to do something and try to circumvent the process. So that's what I'm talking about. If they can't win, they're going to find another way around it. And we as Republicans, we have to be like, okay, well, how do we combat that too? Like I said, we can sit back and say we're so principled, or we can get in the game and we have to compete with them, bottom line. Or the things that we care about, they go away. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Yeah. So you talk about they find other ways, and I think that's what they've done at the State House.
Absolutely.
And why we ended up with the Blue 22.
Absolutely.
So you and I were talking earlier about we've got a primary coming up March 19th. So how many Blue 22s roughly are being primaried?
I want to say it's somewhere around 10. Don't quote me on that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. There's some people, I think maybe 3 people that have been term limited out. Some people have not drawn opponents. But it's a learning experience. I don't agree with what happened. I think President Huffman would be a great speaker because of his experience. I have nothing personal against Speaker Stevens. I don't know. Maybe he's a great guy. I don't know him that well. But I just have a trouble believing that somebody that was a freshman that didn't really have that much experience was the best person to be the Speaker of the House at the time. And when I think about Matt Huffman coming over and the way he's run the Senate, how many times we've had just purely unanimous votes in the Senate, even though there's not that many Democrats. But, he knows how to play nice with the Democrats and allow them to get their wins where they need their wins as well. So that's what could happen in the House as well. So, I mean, I'm hoping that's what happens. I hope we don't get too bitter and ugly in this primary, but it's looking like that's the way it's going to be.
Unfortunately, yeah. And talk about Senator Huffman. I think he earned more respect from me this week. So they passed a budget or a one-time infrastructure spending
Right.
bill in the House. Jason Stevens supported it, and it was supposed to be a collaboration between the House and the Senate, and it gave a lot of favors. It seems like it's a lot of payback to those 22 who helped get Stevens elected.
Absolutely.
And Senator Huffman, it's not going to pass in the House. So I don't know where it's going to go from there. You're more familiar with that.
Yeah.
Explain to everybody what we're talking about.
So it was one-time money that was separate. It basically preceded the actual capital budget process. And it was, I think, $2 billion in kind of a hodgepodge of infrastructure money and several different types of items. But this was something that the House kind of just unilaterally decided that they would pass without having any conversations with the Senate. And that's, I think, essentially what President Huffman is saying is that you guys went off, just decided to do this. You had no conversations with the Senate. We're going to basically go and pass our own version of that, and we really don't care what you passed, which is, like, I totally get it. I think President Huffman is just going to follow the normal capital budget process. That's what he's trying to do and meet those deadlines. And then everybody goes to conference committee and they try to work out the differences and come to compromises. And that's what we've always done in the past. And that's how I think it works the best.
So this bill, according to this article from the Ohio Press Network, the House passed a bill that includes $1.65 billion of borrowed money, which provides $600 million for school district facilities, $397.6 million for construction at state colleges and universities, $400 million for grants and loans to local governments for road, bridge, water, and sewer projects, and $250 million to build and renovate local jails. And Hederman Jr., Vice President of the Policy at the Buckeye Institute, said that Ohio House Bill 2 spends too many state taxpayer dollars on projects that will have little statewide impact and fails to make a transformational investment in education.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I would agree with that statement, 100%.
And one thing I've been just from Representative Stewart does a really good job if you go on his Twitter of unpacking some of the things. It's however you feel about Brian Stewart, he's a very straight shooter. He's a very bright lawyer individual in general. He unpacked some of this, and that's basically what he was saying, is that there's some of these big counties where some of these 22 are at, and there's a lot more funds, coincidentally.
Going to those counties.
Yes, in those areas versus, some of the other members where they're basically getting pennies. And so it's like, well, why would they vote for something like that? And then they were supposed to, I believe, caucus today, and the speaker canceled the caucus because he probably didn't want to be yelled at because of how ridiculous this package was.
So we want everybody to educate themselves on any bills, their state representatives. Look, you can go to the Ohio Legislature website. You can create an account. You can track any specific bill. You will get email notifications of where it is in the process from the time that it's introduced until it passes and where it's at. And if you don't understand it and you want further clarification, which I actually just did this today, you can email the sponsor of the bill or any of the co-sponsors and say, hey, please explain to me in layman's terms what this bill is going to do for me and our state. They want to hear from us. Or if you want to let them know, hey, I support or I don't support this. We have the right to know what they're doing, and you have to be informed when you go cast your vote.
I agree.
I agree 100%. I would say my theme for this year of talking to people is to encourage them to get out and vote, but not just get out and vote. Get out and vote wisely.
Yes.
Educate yourself and be knowledgeable when you go into that voting booth.
So we're faced with some exciting times, some scary times, because state level, national level, our country's struggling. And the world is upside down. What was once considered wrong is now considered right. And we've got a very uphill battle.
I think it's a chaotic and crazy time in our country in general. I think last time we had a presidential election, there's a lot of people I talked to, and they just wanted the chaos to stop. And I think that's, in large part, perhaps people that voted for President Trump in 2016, they may have decided they did not want to vote for him because they thought he was the one causing the chaos. But when you really look at the situation, it's that over 90% of the coverage that man received was negative. There was nothing that he could say that wasn't covered negatively. And the same thing is happening, I think, to just most people on the right, because overwhelmingly the media is controlled by the Democrat establishment. So what we're doing, even though it's 4 of us sitting in a room right now, I mean, it's powerful. And we have to, I think, like I said, encourage other people to do it. And if you need someone to have your back, I got your back. I mean, there is a lot of us, and I know you're afraid. You're afraid they're going to come after your kids. You're afraid they're going to come after you and fire you. But we need to expose people for doing that, because let's call it what it is. That's evil. Unless we're saying something that just because you would disagree with it doesn't mean you have the right to go after someone and threaten their livelihood because it hurts your feelings. This is America. We're going to say things. The essence of the First Amendment is you have to listen to things you don't agree with. It's not so we can have an agree fest. It's so that it engenders robust debate and we polish our ideas and we get the best ideas out of disagreement. And we're not always going to agree. There's lots of people I don't disagree with. Like I said, the members on our Republican side that, they were part of that 22. There's many of those people on that side that are my friends, and I respect them very much. I thought they made a bad decision, but I don't hate them. And, and I just hope that they make a better decision next time. And we need to unite. The biggest thing I'll leave everybody with is the Democrat Party is always united against us. If there's one thing that they do well, and we can take a page out of their book, is that they unite when it comes to us. And right now we're seeing it at this very moment. It's very clear that the majority of the Republican Party supports Donald Trump. But there's still, this chunk of holdouts that They're either closet Democrats or independents that swing Democrat, or they're just never Trumpers. And they can't get over themselves, is what it is. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. They can't handle that the Republican Party has changed, and they're holding on to the past. And we see it, I think, even in our county to some extent here in Franklin County. But at the end of the day, those people have to ask themselves, do you really care about Republican principles? Or do you want Democrats ushering in their policies?
Yeah, so what I like to tell people is it's not just about one person. This is not about Trump. This is about our party. This is about our livelihood. So take a look back compare where you're at financially now. Are you better off now, or were you better off before Biden took office?
Right.
And we can't allow someone who thinks he had a conversation with a French politician who's dead remain in
The
office.
Sixth Sense all over again.
And we can't have people in office and running the White House who are thinking he may have, thinking based on emotions.
Yeah.
And trying to appease one faction of their party. We have to do what's best for the country as a whole. So again, it goes back to educating ourselves. If you're conservative, you're not alone. And there's just as many of us out there as you are. So thank you both for being here. And the fourth person in the room, our engineer, thanks for doing such a great job and sitting there just listening to us.
Thanks for putting up with
This is Straight Shot Politics. Thank you for joining us.